I'm going to paint a galaxy on this really neat round paper from Arteza. And this is going to use the wet on wet technique, so we're just covering it with a good amount of water. I really like to let it sink in. This block is 100% cotton paper, so it's pretty sturdy. It can take quite a bit of water. Cut edges. And I'm just making sure there's no pools or anything like that. It's a relatively small, I think these are 8 by 8 roughly. So not a huge surface, so I don't have to worry too much about pieces drying first, but I always like to make sure this is good and saturated before I get going. So I don't have to think or worry too much about it, because it's harder to add water after the fact. And I'm just using a size 14 brush, both to paint and to add the water here. This is not a super well-known brand. This is, I think, Fumui, which I think I found it on Amazon, and it was relatively inexpensive, but it is pure sable hair, so works pretty well, all things considered, considering I think it was maybe $20 for a set of 6 of these. So they've served me very well so far. Okay, so now that we've got that, I'm gonna jump right into probably my lightest shade first, so a little bit of yellow right in the middle. And I'm just kind of going random with that. It'll be blended with some of the reds and orange that I'm using here in my little mini palette. Rinsing it. And these are my favorite Dr. P.H. Martin's liquid watercolors, Hydrus. And so they're super vibrant, and you don't have to, and so I don't use super large amounts of water for this, because the paints are already liquid. And I like those deep, deep saturated colors. And again, I'm just I'm trying to go from light to dark. I'm using some reds. Oh, that's a nice red. Some orange and yellow for this color palette. And then I'll probably do a little bit of brown and black on the edges to really darken it up a lot. The idea is to kind of make almost cloud-like shapes eventually, but right now I'm just pushing paint on the page, really. Just getting it all covered. And the only thing with these P.H. Martins, and probably with other more saturated watercolors, is they are staining, so it's harder to do lifting later, which is okay. I don't mind that a bit, but it might be not great if you're used to being able to lift your paints off the page afterwards. I do end up doing a little bit of lifting just to get like a cloudy effect, but usually not until after I've gotten a little further along here. So I'm going to try a little bit of this dark Venetian brown. Just kind of go around the edges to space is not all bright and light. I've got too much water. And I kind of mix it with the other colors around it. One of the things I notice with myself is that if I have to remember that the colors don't dry nearly as vivid, so you need to really layer them on. Not necessarily thick, but saturated if you want that kind of bright, bold color that I look for. And also the other thing I do way too often is I crowd my whites and my light colors, so I end up with too much dark almost every time. So I always have to remind myself, you gotta let some of it through. And now we're gonna go into the edges with some black and mix that around in there. And black is really inky and rich, so you don't need a whole lot of it. And I like to kind of mix it with the other colors to get more of a toned black. And we'll see. And then part of it's just letting the color do what it's going to do and seeing what the surprise is. It's always kind of a surprise. You don't really know. It looks pretty good so far, though. Just kind of blending, trying to get some of these blended a little bit more. I've got a little too much water on the page, but that's okay. Little bits of space poking through here. The deep black kind. Maybe just some dots to give it more of a cloudy look. It's coming out really cool though. And a little bit more around the edges. So that those get really dark. Just stippling. Along the edges here. And I step back and just see, what have I done? Oh dear. See if I like it, see if I don't. It's a little bit too neat for me right now, so I think I'm just gonna blend this. And I like blendy, cloudy effect. See how it kind of, the black almost gives way to the brown underneath it. That adds some kind of cloud texture. It's like a fire. And as a galaxy, it looks even better once you get some stars in there. I'm gonna rinse my brush and see if I can't do a little bit of cloud effect with a clean, mostly dry brush. So there's a lot of thick color in there right now, so I gotta rinse it all out. Don't want to mar up the pretty reds and oranges and everything. What I might do is just go in and be like this, so that there's not as many harsh lines. This is just with a barely damp, just a damp brush, really. I want a few harsh lines, a few of those kind of bleeds where they make little veins. I love that. But I don't want that everywhere. So I'm just gonna blend out some of it. And again, I'm just using this paper towel to kind of dab off the water, and then I'll go in and you don't want too much water because then you'll get, well, you might not want too much water. You can get bleed kind of effect, blooming water blooms. They can look really cool actually, but it's not quite what I'm going for here. So try not to lose all my whites here, but I kind of like that. The blended effect looks really nice. And then you can do a little bit of paint pulling, kind of cloudiness on the edges. And I'm just going over it with that kind of rough brush, and it creates little kind of cloudy effect, a misty effect. And rinsing frequently to make sure I'm not smearing my colors too much. So probably over here maybe a little bit of a white place, and over here it's pretty random. Eventually the stuff that I've manipulated kind of settles down and bleeds back into the rest of the paint. It looks really nice. I also kind of want to do that a little bit here. Just get some of that. There's a lot of white in there, and I don't really want the white to be, I want the white sparingly. Obviously, I want the focus to be toward the center. The other nice thing about using an inexpensive brush is I don't feel too bad that I'm a little rough on it. I think that's, brushes are made to be used. I think I probably do better work with the less expensive brushes because I'm less afraid to get messy with them. I always worry that my, I don't know, $15 brush or whatever is gonna, it's like, oh, it's such an investment. But rinsing. All right, let's take a look here. That came out really nice, actually. Kind of want to blend in this a little bit more. Don't want to overwork it. It's the thing I'm good at. Like right there. I just created a hard edge and I don't want one, so we're going to try to very carefully. I think I heard one of the people I listen to or watch videos from call it a thirsty brush. There, that's okay. Just to bleed that edge a little bit more. Add a little bit more texture in some of these colored areas. Step back. Look again. And I'm going to just add a tiny bit more brown up here. Nothing crazy. Stippling at this point, because at some point the paper is going to start to dry soon. And I don't want a lot of weird harsh edges. And now, I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to wait for it to dry before I sprinkle on some stars. Occasionally I'll do a tiny droplet of white or something in there just to get that bleed effect. We'll give it a try. Might not like it, but we'll see. And this is my favorite. I'll use a smaller brush for that. This is my favorite stuff ever. Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. Makes a really, so if I do a little, just a little dab of it, that kind of bleeds, but not really. Let's see. Try to get some kind of soft stars going. Little ones. Or slightly larger ones to make it look like there's kind of an aura around them, or the shine. And then I'll do a sprinkle of some more finite star, like clearer stars as well. This is how I ended up doing little fireflies too. Just adding a little bit of white while the paper's still wet, and eventually painting a white dot in the center, because the bleed really makes a nice kind of glow effect. Not seeing anything there. Yeah, that looks kind of cute. I'm trying to stay on like the wettest parts so that they'll bleed a bit to the surrounding area. I kind of like this effect so far. I don't think I've tried it in quite a while, adding stars while the paper's still wet. Usually I wait till it's dry. But you can't make as tiny stars that way. These are for the larger ones, and then the tiny ones work well with splatters. That's a big boy. It's okay though. I'll add a more clear dot to the center of it when I'm done, and it'll be like a star with a very bright, probably very close or very large is the idea. Just a bunch of little dots. You could spend a long time painting stars on things. And my inclination is to want to make them kind of evenly spaced, but obviously the whole point is to make them kind of random. And that's why the blush brush splatter effect works really well, because it actually is random, or at least more random than my brain, which likes neat, tidy lines and grids. I've spent too much time working as a designer on the web. Everything needs to align to the grid. So I think that's probably good for now. And then I'm gonna, like I said, I'll do some actual splatters soon. Gonna wait for this to dry, and then we'll come back and do splatters on it. All right, so this is probably dry enough. There's still some wet spots on there, but it's not, they're not soaked. You can kind of see. So I'm gonna start adding some stars with my bleed proof white, and woohoo, better drop things not on the right place. This desk takes, or this table has taken quite a beating in its lifetime. I've mentioned this before on my Instagram, but this table was like an old farmhouse kitchen table type thing. And back in the day, my parents would use it to slaughter chickens and and pigs. So, or a pig, I guess. They didn't really do pigs. They happened to have one. So, yeah, anyway, this table has a long and storied history of farmhood life. And so my paint splatters all over the place really don't make much of a dent in it. All right, so I'm just gonna load up my brush with this And I try to go real gentle because I'm already spraying paint everywhere. I've gotten it a little bit too wet. So I'm gonna dip it back into the actual jar so that there's less water and more of the mixture, more of the actual product, if you will. Yeah, I like that because it creates really tiny little stars, and I'm just going around trying to vary my angle so that I don't end up putting them otherwise they all end up in straight lines, which kind of defeats the point. Oop, a little bit big on there. That's okay. You can probably see how this has already lost some of its brilliance around the brown, especially. It's just not quite as dark as it was before. That's normal. And I want lots of stars. I could add stars forever. Plus, it's just fun to hit sticks together, right? I'm like a toddler. Try to get some in the middle, but not too many, because that's a bright area, and so you wouldn't be able to see them, in theory. On the other hand, this is an imaginary galaxy, so I suppose it doesn't matter, but... And I like that there's a nice variety of sizes here. Just tapping gently. That's looking pretty good. Now we're gonna add a nice dollop into the middle of that big star area there. Just a nice thicker, give it a little bit of definition. Here too, and here. So any of those more blurry stars that I added before are getting well-defined centers. And I really, really love how the bleed-proof white shows up against these other paints. I've used gouache as well, but the bleed-proof is just far, far brighter. I mean, there's a reason they call it bleed-proof, I guess. But let's make sure I'm using a long round. Oh no, I guess it's not long round. It's just a round brush from Princeton Velvet Touch series for this. And just add some larger, clearer stars around randomly. Lots of little dots. And I think we're just about done. But yep, I think that's good. There we have it. Just a orange and red and yellow galaxy. Kind of a fiery galaxy. Fun.